Y'all this morning. All right, well, go ahead and take your Bible and turn to Matthew 24. As you probably have figured out, I don't want to rush through Matthew 24 and these passages. So I realize we are off track according to our Sunday school literature, but I hope you'll forgive me for that. I feel like, especially in the day and time that we are in, we really need to understand this passage. This is a passage that has been debated for generations. There has been little consensus over the years exactly what this means, and it's a hard passage to follow because so much is dealt with in Matthew chapter 24. I believe that since we are closer to the end of days, our understanding is greater now. We've got a better insight because we've seen some things happen that a few generations ago folks did not see or maybe did not even realize what was happening when it was happening. So we're going to enter this prayerfully. I'm not going to rush through it. If you have a question, feel free to ask. I'm not guaranteeing I can answer. If I don't have an answer, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm going to make one up. No, I won't do that. Or I'm going to say, I don't know, and I'll try to find out what the answer is and get back to you, all right? And sometimes my answer could be wrong, and I'll find out later, and I'll come back and correct it. That's been known to happen as well. So we need to enter this passage this morning very prayerfully as we go. So just a quick reminder, we're basically picking up where we left off last week. If you remember, last week we talked about the triumphal entry, recognizing that this began a countdown prophetically. It was a fulfillment of a prophecy that happened 500 years previous by the prophet Daniel. He prophesied, and it was given to him the day and the hour, pretty much, that Jesus would enter into Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and he would be greeted in the way he was, all right? And we have a time frame that was set specifically, and we can count it down to the very day, which is amazing. Folks, if there's no other reason to believe Scripture, fulfilled prophecy should answer all your questions in regard to that. If we can recognize the fact that God has fulfilled so many prophecies of this book that it should give credence to the rest of the book. We shouldn't be questioning the rest of the book because God has told us so much. So chapter 20 dealt with, and 21 dealt with the triumphal entry. We also saw Jesus cleanse the temple for the second time. We saw the story of the cursing of the fig tree and how it withered and what that represented in regard to the nation of Israel who promised fruit but did not deliver. And therefore God has judged them because they failed to produce the fruit they were supposed to, all right? Of course, the Pharisees continue to challenge the authority of Jesus. And Jesus responds to the Pharisees with two parables that are directed directly to unbelieving Israel and the unbelieving Pharisees. The parable of the two sons and the parable of the tenants. Then in chapter 22, we have a third parable, the parable of the wedding feast, in which we see that the wedding guests that were invited to the wedding didn't show. And so through the process, many other invitations were issued, and finally, go out into the highways and the hedges and bring them in. And we have that, again, as a prophetic parable of the spreading of the gospel to the Jew first and then to the Greek, all right? Once again, the Pharisees and the Sadducees try to trap Jesus and have some sort of legitimate charge they can bring against him, and of course they fail in that attempt. Jesus then questions the Pharisees about John the Baptist. Or John the Baptizer, he said, from where did John's baptism come? Was it his, or did it come from God? And the Pharisees, if they said it was from God, Jesus would have responded, well, why didn't you listen to him? If they said it was from him, then we're going to get the people mad at us because they believe he came from God. So they said, oh, we don't know. And Jesus said, okay, well, I'm not going to answer your question either. But he does, okay? And he, in chapter 23, we see a scathing rebuke of the Pharisees. Now, folks, if you ever hear anyone say that Jesus just taught peace and love, have them read Matthew chapter 23. Because one of the most scathing rebukes of the Pharisees happens right there. And at the end of it, Jesus laments over Jerusalem. So where is Jesus at this particular point? What's his physical location when all these things that we've just talked about have taken place? Where is he? He's at the temple, right? He's at the temple. Remember that the temple is on the west side. That's west, right? I get turned around in Bella Vista. All right. The west side of the Kidron Valley. And the Kidron Valley basically is a highway that runs through. It's that narrow. It just slopes down like this. There's a highway. So you have on the west side the Temple Mount, and on the east side is the Mount of Olives. Very interesting that as you look today at the Temple Mount, you're seeing the eastern wall of the Temple Mount. You don't see a temple there because there's not one. Anybody know what you do see when you look up at the Temple Mount? You see the Dome of the Rock, which is Muslim. Remember, during the Ottoman Empire, Suleiman, the Dome of the Rock was built. He also closed in the eastern gate because he had read the prophecy of the return of Jesus, that he would enter in through the Golden Gate or the Eastern Gate. So he had it sealed up. And then to add another stamp to the seal, he had a Muslim cemetery placed right in front of the Eastern Gate. Why? Because no self-respecting Jew would ever set foot on a Muslim cemetery. Little did he know who Jesus is. Well, and guess what the Jews did then? On the slope of the Mount of Olives, they also put a cemetery for the Jews. And so you've got two cemeteries, a Muslim cemetery here on the left and a Jewish cemetery on the right. And so that's the picture, that's the scene. Now, those cemeteries obviously were not there when Jesus was there. He would come down and he would actually walk into a garden, an olive grove, and it was there on the Mount of Olives, where the Garden of Gethsemane is. And it was there on the Mount of Olives that chapter 24 takes place, all right? And we have what is called the Olivet Discourse. Now, of course, theologians and scholars always like to give fancy names to everything. So what is the Olivet Discourse? Well, it just means this happened on the Mount of Olives. Okay? That's all it means. So while Jesus is on the Mount of Olives with his disciples, the following teaching and conversation takes place. All right, so let's begin. Matthew 24, beginning with verse 1. Get my eyeballs on. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to him to show him the buildings of the temple. So once again, the picture for us is Jesus has just rebuked the Pharisees. I mean, this has been a scathing thing. And the disciples are just in awe over all of this. And as they come out, they just point to the temple buildings. This was the restoration of the second temple, the temple that was rebuilt after the Babylonian captivity. And it had fallen into disrepair, and Herod, 40 years previous, had started an extensive renovation of the temple. So by the time you come to Jesus' day, that renovation has just now come to completion. It was nothing like the temple that Solomon built, but still it was quite something to see. It was quite glorious, and the disciples are just pointing to the temple, and I guess maybe trying to get Jesus' mind off of what just happened. I don't have any idea exactly why they brought this up, other than the fact that Jesus is going to, it spawns a prophecy, and several prophecies concerning the destruction of that temple, the destruction of Jerusalem, the end of days, and the second coming of Christ. All right, so let's continue. Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Well, surely I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." All right, so at this point, this is about 33 AD. Do we know that what Jesus said, this prophecy, do we know that it was fulfilled? Yeah, it was fulfilled to the very letter. You say, well, what about the Western Wall? Well, that's not actually part of the temple. That's part of the Temple Mount. Herod built a huge retaining wall around the Temple Mount. That's all that is. If you see pictures of the Western Wall today, it's also been called the Weeping Wall. What you're seeing is a huge retaining wall to hold in the soil and the dirt of about a 40-acre temple area. All right, so the Temple Mount is extensive. It covers about 40-plus acres. And so the Western Wall, what we're seeing is the remnants of the Temple Mount. If you go up on the Temple Mount, there is nothing left of the temple. In fact, we can't even tell for sure exactly where the temple sat. All right, some believe it occupied the space where the Dome of the Rock is now. Others say no, it was about 100 yards further to the north, which is very possible. So we don't know exactly where it sat. We can only surmise. And so that prophecy was fulfilled completely. Anybody remember when? 70 AD by Titus. Come in and destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. And he said, well, why did he destroy the temple? Because the temple interior was filled with gold. And when they had set fire to all of the interiors of the temple, it melted the gold, and the gold ran in between the blocks that made the temple, and so they tore down the blocks to get to the gold. And so that led them to tear down, they tore down every single stone that was there. All right, y'all with me so far? Good? All right, let's go back now to verse 3. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives. Now, folks, I want you to put yourself in the place of the disciples for a moment. How would you have responded to that? Horror. Yeah, well, and I think the logical question would be what? When's it going to happen? Yeah, are we looking at something here right now? What? And the temple was the center of Jewish worship, and that went against everything that they thought and believed about the coming of Messiah. They believed Messiah would come and he would set up his government in Jerusalem, and the temple would be the center of that government. And so if the temple's destroyed, that would be a sign that what they had hoped Jesus was going to accomplish wouldn't be accomplished. So yeah, I think horror is a very good term for how they felt at that particular point. And so they naturally had some questions. So they asked Jesus 3 questions. Now, this has been something of controversy. I've heard preachers say there's 1 question here. Others say there's just 2. I personally believe there are 3 questions. And these 3 questions are not all answered in the Gospel of Matthew. We'll need to go to Luke and to Mark to fill in some gaps as we continue the study. And the other thing is that Jesus does not answer these questions in the order that they are asked. And by the way, folks, that's teacher prerogative. You know, every now and then, somebody will ask me a multifaceted question. You know, that's got maybe 2 or 3 questions built in within it. And I have to sit there and think, okay, now how do I answer this? Do I take 1 or 2 or 3? Well, if I answer 1 first, then they're not really going to understand, because the answer to question number 3 will have a bearing on my answer to question number 1. That makes sense? And so we've got to recognize that Jesus is answering these questions based upon how the disciples will understand, as well as Matthew is reporting this to a specific group of folks, and he wants them to understand that Jesus is the King of the Jews. And so his answer is, or his narrative is designed to depict that fact. All right, so let's pick up. So what are these questions? I lost my place. Verse 3. Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us." Question number 1. When will these things be? What things? The destruction of the temple. Yeah, what he has just said about the temple. But then they add something else. And what will be the sign of your coming? So it has to be the second. Yeah, they have to be acknowledging the fact somehow here that there's going to be another coming. All right? And then number 3, and what are the signs of the end of the age? 3 questions. And the answer is very telling. All right? Verse 4. And Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass." How many? All. Let's just read this last phrase with me, okay? But the end is not yet. Say it with me. But the end is not yet. Very important phrase. For, and circle that word for, we'll deal with that in a moment. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So what do we have? Well, Jesus is answering their question, but he does not start with question number 1, the destruction of the temple. He actually starts with number 3. What are the signs of the end of the age? And what age are we dealing with? Well, in their mind, I'm thinking they're probably the age of was the time that the Jews were in until Jesus came. The age to us, we understand it to be the church age in which we live. When did the church age begin? Pentecost. With the coming of the Holy Spirit, the pouring out of the Holy Spirit on individual believers. That began the church age. When does the church age end? At the rapture of the church, which we'll get to later on in our study. All right. So Jesus begins by saying that they need to recognize that during the age, all right, some things are going to be happening, and they are birth pangs. Now, this has been a very long pregnancy, okay? Over 2,000 years. All right? Do what? They're getting worse. And they're getting worse. Now, by birth pangs, we know what? Well, we're expecting something at the end. What are we expecting? A baby, a birth. Well, obviously the birth pangs and the baby, if we would put it in that vernacular, is the second coming of Christ. And so prior to that, during the pregnancy. There are some things that are going to happen that happen during pregnancy. All right? I know that's a rough illustration, but that's in essence exactly when Jesus said, but the end is not yet, and these things must come to pass, or this is the beginning of sorrows. The terminology is all about birth pangs. So he's using that analogy to help us understand what's going on. So there's some things that we need to understand are going to happen during the church age. And just like any pregnancy, at the beginning, the birth pangs are, do I dare say minimal? Mild? And the closer you get to delivery, the more intense those birth pangs become. So the birth pangs began, and we see things beginning to happen. And Jesus said, these things must happen. So the first thing he says that there will be deceivers who claim to be Messiah. I'll look again at verse 4 and 5. And Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. So, is he talking about just in the end of the last days, or is he talking about this something happening throughout church history? Folks, this has happened all throughout church history. Pardon? And it's getting worse. I did a Google search, and I asked this question: how many have claimed to be Messiah since Jesus was on earth? And the answer came back, the exact number is undeterminable. But we have record of nearly 100 that have claimed to be Jesus. So we've had nearly 100. Now, let me ask you this. Can you think of any who have claimed to be Jesus in your lifetime? Who? Okay, guy in Waco. What was his name?
Long hair.
David Koresh? Yeah. All right, yeah, he was one. Jim Jones? There's a really big one in Korea.
Jim Baker?
No, Jim Baker never claimed to be Messiah. Sun Myung Moon. Sun Myung Moon in Korea. Remember back in the 70s, 80s, he performed a wedding ceremony for 1,000 people in Korea, and he claimed to be the Messiah. Folks, time doesn't allow me to really do this morning, but let me encourage you, just get online and just type in claims of who claims to be Christ. You're going to find many out there today who are claiming to be Christ. And so what he tells to us is, don't be deceived by these folks. So here's how do we know then that they aren't Jesus come in the flesh? Because other things have to happen before he comes. And number two is real simple, look around. Look at the person next to you. Look in the mirror. If Jesus had come, well, at least many would not be here. Yeah. We hope we all would not be here. One time I was preaching, and it thundered. We had a terrible storm came up, and the lights went out. And I wish I would have had the presence of mind to duck down behind the pulpit. And I told the congregation, folks, I really wish I would have thought to duck down behind the pulpit and just disappear on you and see how you would have responded to that. They didn't like that. But, folks, the point is simply this. We know that these are false messiahs because there are too many other things that have to happen before Jesus comes. And when Jesus comes the second time, it's going to be very visible, very, in other words, there will be no question that Jesus has come. Okay? So hang on to that, because, again, that we're going to be dealing with that as we get to the end of this passage. All right? Second thing, wars and rumors of wars. Now, this is a big one, but he says here, but the end is not yet. And very important where this is placed. Wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not yet. Okay? Now, when it comes to wars and rumors of war, once again, an internet search, from 2500 BC to 1900, there have been 184 recorded wars in this period covering 4,000 years. Now, that's just recorded wars. We know there's been a lot of other skirmishes that were not recorded, all right? But that's 184 recorded in the last 4,000 years, or in a 4,000-year period ending in 1900. From 1900 to 2014, there are 251 recorded wars, a period that covers only 114 years. Many of these wars are still occurring, and many more have started since 2014. In fact, we're in another right now, right? Since World War II, many countries have been building up massive arsenals of conventional and nuclear weapons. Folks, we went through the period of, we lived through the Cold War. You know, we understood the danger of a nuclear war. In fact, how many of you were in school and had drills of what to do in the case of a nuclear? And I don't know how in the world getting down under a desk would have helped. But that's what we were told to do. You remember? Yeah. And so this thing of wars and the potential for war grows day by day by day. So once again, what are we seeing? We're seeing an escalation of this birth pang. We're seeing that it's getting more and more intense. And in the last 10 years, how many wars have we seen, particularly in the Middle East? It's just continuous. It's continuous. But Jesus said these wars must happen, but the end is not yet. Yes, sir.
Gary, there's a lot of talk about these aliens now.
Yeah.
One of the commentators made a comment that it will be like Jesus returning, and he will claim to be the Messiah, and he will come doing great miracles and being able to raise the dead.
Right.
There's a lot of information, but it's all going to be demonic, and it's going to be by one claiming to be an alien.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
He was very convincing.
Yeah.
That this could possibly
Yeah.
be.
Did y'all hear that? And this is something that definitely we're seeing an escalation of the reporting of UFO. And I just got to refer to Andy here. Andy did an outstanding job on a Facebook post explaining why he doesn't believe in UFOs. And I think he just hit the nail right on the head. So I'll let you ask him about that, because it is such a good answer. And if I would kind of do a summary of it a little bit, I think he basically believes, as I do and as Chick just mentioned, that what we're seeing is demonic activity. And I believe that's absolutely true, all right? So why, again? Well, once again, folks, for the coming of the Antichrist to happen, there's got to be a reason for the world to unite around one person. Do you see that happening today? It's coming closer, but we still got so much division worldwide. There's going to be something that happens to get the world to say we've got to unite to face this common enemy. And so I think alien invasion could be one of those things that they bring to the table. But remember, it is demonic activity. Okay? Now, but I'm emphasizing something here, because here's where this really takes an interesting twist. And we really begin to see how this applies to you and me. Jesus said, all these things got to happen, but the end is not yet. And the very next phrase, look what he says. Verse 6, and you will hear wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For, circle the word for, little Greek word, G-A-R is how it's spelled or pronounced in Greek. Actually, it's Y. And the Greek characters would be kind of like a Y-A-R. But it's pronounced gar. And for is a good translation, but it shows causality. All right? And so instead of for, we can translate this because. Because. That's really what he's saying. He's saying, all right, he said, the end is not yet. Well, why is the end not yet? For, because. Because something's got to happen before the end happens. All right? So, what is it? For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places. So what we have is this statement, because nation will rise against nation. Right after it says the end is not yet. All right? So what does that mean, nation shall rise against nation? Well, we kind of think it just kind of refers back to the wars and the rumors of wars, and certainly it does have that does have bearing. This is, Arnold Fruchtenbaum explains this in this way. What this is what's known as a Hebrew idiom. What's an idiom? I didn't say idiot. What's an idiom? Pardon? Well, if I say once in a blue moon, what do you take that to mean? Rarely. Or how about snug as a bug in a rug? Do what? Warm, comfort, safe. How about the cat got your tongue? We don't think a little cat got your tongue, but what are we understanding that to mean? Yeah, I can't say anything. Something I'm prohibited from speaking for some reason. Well, the Hebrews that Jesus was speaking to understood this phrase, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, as referring to a total conflict in the area that's under consideration in whatever they're talking about. All right? All right. Total conflict in the area that is being referred to at this particular point. Now, I'll just give you a couple examples. We don't have time to go there. You can look them up. In Isaiah 19, verses 1 to 4, we have this concept displayed, and also in 2 Chronicles 15, 1 through 7. And so the question that we have to ask when we hear this idiom is, what is the area that is in view that the speaker is dealing with? Okay? But as he talked about wars and rumors of wars, as he's talked about these deceivers coming to deceive many, what area is he really referring to? The what? Not the temple. I heard it. The world. The world. He's talking, he's talking about not so much tribulation, but he's talking about that something's going to happen on a worldwide scope that is the trigger, maybe put it, the water broke, okay, that causes the birth pangs to escalate because we're getting closer and closer to the delivery. All right. So as we think of nation rising against nation and kingdom against kingdom, can you think of any wars that involved the entire world? World War I, which at that time was not called World War I. It was called the war to end all wars. All right. In World War I, over 100 countries from Africa, the Americas, Asia, Australia, and Europe were all involved in World War I. Then a few years later, World War II broke out, which gave the World War I its name. And we have a total of 132 countries that participated in World War II. And so we've got a catalyst here. And what has happened as a result of World War I and World War II? What have we seen take place on a worldwide scope that would give us some type of indication that the end is close? What? COVID? Well, that falls under the pestilences. All right, so let's just move on to the next phrase. Famines, pestilences, and earthquakes. All right? So have there been famines? Do you realize the World Health Organization basically forecasts that within 50 years we'll have a global food shortage? And there are pundits out there now that are saying it's going to happen sooner than that. Glenn Beck being one of them, I think, if I remember right. Pestilence. Hey, we got a new one, folks. What is it? The hantavirus. Guess what? The Hebrew word for hanta, you know what it means? To deceive. Don't know if that has any bearing or not, but it's interesting. But folks, how afraid are we of going out in public? You know, these are pestilences that are happening all around us. How about earthquakes? Yeah, we're seeing more and more and more. And, you know, we know that there's a huge San Andreas fault on the west coast, but do you realize there's a fault in the middle of the country that is bigger than San Andreas? And what is it? It's the New Madrid fault. And where does it lie? Right along the eastern coast of Arkansas, eastern border of Arkansas, and runs up through Missouri and Iowa and those areas north, and then runs up on further south. And we're getting more and more. In fact, what was it, just a few months ago, there's a 4.0 earthquake hit in that area. You know, and people said over in here, some people even felt the earth quivering at that particular point. Now, those are all part of those birth pangs, but how about after World War I, World War II, what happened? Well, I think we've got a very important sign that began to take place at that point. Actually, even before that. But we see it escalating, especially after World War I and World War II. Chick, you had a question?
Well, is it centering more and more on Israel as the center
Yes.
of all of this conflict?
It does. Thank you. Great segue to this slide. He asked, is it centering more and more on Israel as we enter into this time? And the answer to that is yes, it is. And the reason is because Israel is a relatively new nation in the modern era. It's an old nation, it's an ancient nation, but for our time and world, Israel is considered a new nation. All right? Now, so we've got a fulfillment of prophecy happening here. So, people of Israel, this is a significant event. And World War II, again, becomes to be a real catalyst that caused this migration to increase. All right, Amos chapter 9. I'm not going to turn there because we don't have time, so I'm going to let you go there. I'll just read it to you. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when the plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes, him who sows the seed. The mountains shall drip sweet wine, and all the hills shall flow with it. I will restore the fortunes of my people Israel, and they shall rebuild the ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine. They shall make gardens and eat their fruit. I will plant them on their land, and they shall never again be uprooted out of the land that I have given them. Now, folks, we've seen that happen. We're seeing it happen right now. So during the last 130 years, Jews from over 108 nations have migrated back to the land of Israel. It all began, believe it or not, in 1882. The first wave of modern immigration to Israel started as Jews fled persecution or followed the socialist Zionist ideas of Moses Hess. Then from 1882 to 1919, around 75,000 Jews immigrated to what was then known as Palestine, mostly from Russia. And by the way, folks, they bought land. They paid for it, okay? They bought land from the Ottomans, who the Ottoman Empire was in control of the Holy Land, in control of Israel at that time. And so these Jews who migrated primarily from Russia purchased land from the Ottoman Empire. So don't say they stole it or they occupy it. They bought it and paid for it, okay? So they have title deed to the land that they purchased, all right? They bought land from the Ottomans and individual Arab landholders and established agricultural settlements. During this period, the Hebrew language was revived. Newspapers and literature were published in Hebrew, and political parties and workers' organizations were established. Then, in 1917, during World War I, the British government, in its Balfour Declaration, supported plans for a national home for the Jews in their promised land. Later, the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, lost control of the Middle East. This made it possible for hundreds of thousands more immigrants to arrive from Europe. Anti-Semitism drove most there. Many more would have come had it not been for Arab protest and resulting British restrictions on immigration. During World War II, the Nazis killed around 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. So it became clear to the Jews that they needed a homeland. Many Holocaust survivors immigrated illegally to Palestine, and when the British pulled out of Palestine in May of 1948, the state of Israel formally declared its independence, and it all happened in one day, as is prophesied in the book of Jeremiah. All right? There's more. But what's the point? That today, Israel's population is over 8.22 million. Okay? In 2018, Israel did celebrate its 70th anniversary. Been 70 years. But some of its neighbors hate it and want to wipe it off the map. We've seen that. Guys, this was written, what I've just read to you, I wrote in 2018. What have we seen since then? Wars and wars and more wars, all focusing on what? Not just Israel, wiping Israel off the face of the earth. You know, when they say from the Jordan to the sea, when the Palestinians make that declaration, and again, I'm using the term Palestinian very loosely here, but when the Palestinians make that declaration from the Jordan to the sea, what are they saying? We don't want to live with the Jews. We want them out of here. And we don't want to just chase them away. We want to exterminate them. And that's been what they have been attempting to do. Now, folks, please understand that right now the U.S. is standing with Israel. And the war in Iran has a whole lot to do with our standing against Israel, because Iran has been the instigator in most all of these attacks on Israel over the last 10 years. Funded, by the way, and I'm going to get political, but funded by our own government. Our president at that time sent them, and I know a congressman that saw it firsthand, the pallets of bills on a cargo plane, over $1 billion was sent to Iran in cash, okay, by our government. Previous administration also enabled them to acquire uranium, enriched uranium. Prior administration also allowed them more billions of dollars. And what have these billions of dollars been used for? Weapons. Not for the people. It's the most depressed people. In fact, folks, you talk to Iranians, they're rooting President Trump on. All right, I know I'm getting political, but just live with it, okay? Because this is where we live. Now, what is the important factor here? God's at work. We are seeing a fulfillment of prophecy, and it's beginning to escalate more and more rapidly. And when we come back next week, we're going to see what happens at the beginning of the tribulation. After the church is raptured, what begins to happen. And so the whole point of this is something we need to remember, that God is not finished with Israel yet. A lot more has to happen, and we are right there as witnesses to what's going to happen. Now, why is that so important? It's so important because, folks, we have hope. If we didn't know what was going to happen, where would we be? We would be lost. We would be lost. Steve?
Gary, doesn't this happen back during the Old Testament when Abraham had Isaac? Before he had Isaac, he had Ishmael.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible says Ishmael will be
Right.
many millions of people.
Right. Well, exactly.
There'll be donkeys of men.
That's right. And by the way, the Muslims trace their lineage back to Abraham through, guess who? Ishmael. That's exactly right. Yes, where?
There's not going to be peace
No.
until the Antichrist comes.
Right, exactly. And that's going to be a short-lived peace. Yeah.
We, meaning Christians, are not going to be here because we'll be raptured.
That's exactly right. So we will, and by the way, folks say the rapture isn't in the Olivet Discourse. I disagree. It is there. We're going to see it. Hopefully when we get there next week.
So think about it. Bush, Obama, Trump,
Mm-hmm.
none of them
That's right.
have been successful in
That's right.
getting peace.
And they can't be.
It's not going to.
That's right. In fact, folks have been trying to have broker peace in Israel long before any of these presidents that you just mentioned. All right? Somebody said something a moment ago. Yeah.
I don't think it's political, because if it wasn't written in here,
There you go.
and it is,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not political.
No.
Because God sets up kings.
Exactly.
And takes kings down.
Very good.
It's not political.
Well, it's political, but it's politics that God is in control of.
That's exactly right.
You know, and so we need to accept that and realize it and rejoice.
But he put them in, so I'm
That's
glad
right.
he put it in, because he's lying.
He makes, yeah, exactly, folks, exactly. So, amen. Can't add to that. So let's have a word of prayer. We need to go. Pardon?
You may not know why he put them in.
We don't,
He put them in for his purpose.
and we can begin to look back and see what's happening. All right, let's have a word of prayer. Father, as we come to you now, Lord, we are